chair the Financial Services Skills Commission. Welcome to the launch today of our Skills Gap framework. This Skills Gap Analysis Toolkit will help firms understand the skills they need for the future. And it's a product of great collaboration with our work streams and led particularly by Stephen Noakes from Lloyds. Let me start off with a few housekeeping notes. I always like to do that first. The event is being recorded so that we can share it with those people who aren't able to make it today. Raise your virtual hands if you want to take part in the Q&A later on, and mute when you're not speaking. So that's the sort of the admin bit done. One of the things I've sort of really appreciated over the course of the last 3 years as we've set up the commission and worked through our challenge about how do we support firms to reskill and upskill is actually need to understand the skills that we need for the future. To think about the forecasting, think about the demands. How many people will we need in particular roles in the future if we are to fully utilize the value of the investment we've made in the digitization of financial services over the course of the next decade. We also know from talking to members of the Skills Commission that skills forecasting is a challenge. It's not easy to do. We know in everyday life that how difficult it is to forecast from one moment to the other. What will face our businesses, what the challenges will be. And that equally applies to skills. We know that about 20% of our members don't currently collect data on future skills. And about 3/4 of firms don't collect data on future skills proficiency levels. And this restricts our ability to develop a strategy on upskilling and reskilling our workforce. We do know that forecasting skills is beneficial. Over 6 in 10 of firms have seen a real positive impact for investing for skills in the future, reducing the need to hire externally, for example. And the Skills Gap Analysis Toolkit supports the need for wider and deeper skills forecasting. This is an area where firms need a suite of tools, and we hope that the toolkit, in whole or in part, will help our member firms improve their capacity and capability in forecasting and enable them to make more progress in upskilling and reskilling. And for the Commission, as we think about the next stage in our journey, how we work with you to embed these tools is really going to be critical to what we do. At our board meeting last week, it was agreed that we extend the life of the Commission for another 3 years. And the focus in that 3-year period is very much around embedding. And this toolkit and the launch today is very much an example of the sort of work we'll continue to do in the future. So we've got 3 brief presentations and then a Q&A session. Stephen Noakes, who's the Chief Digital Officer and Transformation Director Retail at Lloyds Bank, will kick off. He'll then hand over to Ant Mazen, who's the Head of People for Customer Services at Lloyds Banking Group. And then Simi Sandhu, who is from Siemens Financial Services, will talk a little bit about Siemens' own approach to skills forecasting. So Stephen, over to you.
Thank you, Mark, and good morning, everyone. Delighted to be here to help launch the Skills Forecasting Toolkit. It really has been a collective, and thanks to all of those that have been involved in it. In this kind of first 10 minutes, I'm just keen to kind of spend some time talking really about my view on the importance of forecasting, how we've kind of used that in Lloyds and the benefits that we've got, and then how I see that kind of evolving as we move forward. I had the opportunity to kind of write a small forward in the Future Skills Report, which we published in March this year. And in that, I talked about the fact that ensuring a business can successfully adapt to the future is only really possible with access to the right skills and talent. But to act on those talent and skills, firms need clarity on the direction of travel. Or in other words, what are the right skills and talent for them? But that's particularly difficult for a number of reasons. Firstly, many firms do not understand the skills that they currently have. Secondly, in a world that is changing as rapidly as this one, it is difficult to look beyond the current year, forget looking out 3 to 5 years to determine what skills you will need in the future. And even after you do, skill needs will continue to change alongside business strategy, meaning that it can't just be a one-off exercise. So what's the answer? As a sector, skills forecasting is too important to be treated as too difficult. You can no longer simply cross your fingers and hope that candidates will arrive at your organization with the skills you need, or indeed that employees will simply know what skills you require and on their own time and money be able to develop them ready for when you need them. Thankfully, as Mark highlighted, things are changing on that front. More and more FS firms are starting to take the time to identify the skills they need for the future and have started to establish recurring processes to identify them in order to guide investment in reskilling and upskilling. However, Mark also referenced that around 20% of firms do not forecast for future skills. And for those firms that do, around 75% do not hold proficiency levels, and over 25% only look between 6 months and 2 years ahead, which limits the possibility of putting any meaningful reskilling in place. And back in 2017, Lloyds was one of those firms. The board and the exec leadership team knew that we were going to need different skills to deliver the next stage of our strategy. The challenge was they didn't know what skills would be needed or how many colleagues would need them. In addition, they didn't know how many colleagues might already have them. 5 years later on, and we're still very much at the stage where we're continually learning and continually refining the way we think about both skills and skills forecasting. We're still a long way from where we would like to be. However, we now have an approach to learning that is more focused on building the skills for the future as it is on building the skills for today. We have adopted a skills-based approach to both apprenticeships and grad development. We recruit and identify talent based on future fit as much as for current role fit. And we're reducing our reliance on external resource that provides the skills which we believe will be critical to our future. And we're even building our new location strategy around future skills and talent. So how do we go about that approach? I want to start by saying there is no single approach to skills forecasting, and that our approach is just that, it's our approach. The Future Skills Report highlighted that firms currently use a range of different approaches, tools and processes to forecast future skills. However, the objective is always the same: understanding what is changing in the business or wider industry in order to understand and interpret how that will impact the skills needed. As I mentioned before, Lloyd's journey started in 2017 when the board and the exec leadership team asked to understand the size of the skills gap required to deliver the next phase of the business strategy and what it would take to close that gap. Given the question was posed in July and the answer was required by November, that left us with only 3 months to provide an answer that would be credible enough to garner support for the level of investment we would require to make progress over those next 3 years. We knew in this time we needed to work out what our starting point was. So what skills did we currently have? What our direction of travel was? What work did we need to both now and in the future? How it would be different from today, and therefore what skills would we need? And what action and therefore investment would we need to take us on the journey from where we were to where we needed to be? We also knew we didn't have the time to conduct a bottom-up analysis of skills, the time to introduce new systems to help automate the task, or the time to introduce new frameworks or a common language to help us consistently talk about skills across the group. The Lloyds approach to skills forecasting was and still is a response to the need to move at pace with a focus on direction rather than perfection. In its simplest form and by necessity, it was driven more by a focus on conversation than on data analysis and extrapolation. It became about getting the right people with the right experience and knowledge from across the organization to sit down and talk to one another about their plans for the future, the impact they would have, and what that meant for the skills they felt they would need. And the output of this rapid piece of skills forecasting, firstly, an understanding of the future skills that would be required by each of the 12 divisions and support functions that comprised Lloyds at that time. Secondly, the development of division-specific action plans to help build and buy those skills over the next 3 to 5 years. And thirdly, an understanding of the 10 key skills that were common across a number of those divisions and support functions, and the identification of 8 group-wide actions that could be led by the HR function to reduce duplication and maximize the reuse of common solutions. In addition, we learned a lot about skills forecasting simply by putting it into practice. This experience and the lessons learned has helped us to iterate and repeat the exercise a number of times since 2017. For example, to help develop skills action plans for our engineering function and our customer services function, and also currently being used to help guide our future location and property strategy. The commission members with control experience and our lessons learned to help the commission develop the Skills Gap Analysis Toolkit, which we're launching today. So how's that skills forecasting been received at Lloyds? It's allowed us to inject a bit of science and method and consequently credibility into something that people had previously either not done or treated as some form of dark art. As a result, at the end of 2017, we were able to secure more investment in learning than we had ever achieved before, resulting in every colleague spending 25% more time on learning than they had done previously, with over 5 million additional hours spent learning from 2018 to 2020. And it wasn't just on any learning. This was colleagues spending their time developing skills we had identified as critical, such as data, agile change, applied science, and cybersecurity. The work has continued in our efforts to build a modern engineering function with tangible actions resulting from our skills forecasting exercise, resulting in the onboarding of a new engineering learning platform, the development and launch of 15 engineering skills pathways, the development of a pan-engineering modern engineering accelerator program, and a 400% increase in the number of software engineering graduates starting each year. And the work continues, only now it's supported by a permanent strategic workforce planning team that has been mobilized in HR to support every area of the group with skills forecasting. So what about the future? With the establishment of a permanent team and the additional investment to help improve the technology used to support the work, the outlook looks positive. What will be critical for Lloyds in the future is ensuring that we don't overcomplicate the exercise. In addition, we need to get comfortable adopting a dynamic approach to the exercise and feeling comfortable skating with the puck, as Gartner described in their report on future-proofing for shifting skills, rather than potentially wasting a lot of time and effort trying to predict where the puck will go. For the sector as a whole, I think the outlook is equally positive. More financial services organizations than ever before are talking about skills forecasting, and a significant number are already on with it. The hope is that the launch of the Skills Gap Analysis Toolkit today will simply help to consolidate the progress made to date by providing the sector with a common approach, a set of guidelines and templates, which firms with established methods can use alongside their existing methods, and firms without methods can use to jumpstart their own work in the field of skills forecasting. That's enough from me. I'm sure you're all more interested to listen to Ant and actually kind of see the skills toolkit in practice. So Ant, over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Stephen. And just whilst I do my intros, I'll get Matthew to share a couple of slides and then we're going to jump into a demo. But I'm Ant Bazin, I'm the head of people for customer services at Lloyds Banking Group. And And I'm here to provide you with an overview of the toolkit and also a bit of guidance on how you actually go about using it. The slides worth referencing are available as part of the toolkit. So don't worry, there will be copies of this because they will be useful in their own right. But why do it? So we've already touched upon this through what Mark said, what Stephen's said, but of a number of skill challenges that we found were faced by the financial services industry, the ability to identify and communicate the skills that we need in the future was one of the big ones. Now, that wasn't to suggest that there are loads of great examples of skills forecasting work going on, but what was clear from the research was that not all organisations necessarily had the time, the support, or the know-how on how to do it. And even organisations that were doing it well reported challenges driving action off the back of the analysis. So with that in mind, we thought we'd develop an industry-wide toolkit to help financial services organisations forecast their skills for the future, understand where their key skills gaps are, and identify actions to help close the gaps. Now, the toolkit is built around 3 key phases that you'll see on the screen. Where are we now? And this is all about the organisation's current work, roles and skills. Second, where do we need to be in the future, which is all about determining where organisations are going and what that will mean for the work people do, the roles needed, and the skills required to do them. And then thirdly, how do we close the gap between the two, which is all about understanding the size of the skills gap and what needs to be done to close it. And some people call this a skills sourcing strategy and an action plan. Now, what the toolkit provides is an approach and a set of supporting materials and templates to help. And these include a how to use toolkit for both the facilitator and also the participants. And this includes workshop slides that you can use straight out of the can. There are some output templates for the future work and skills summary and the skills action plan. So it is all there for you to be able to capture what comes out of the various different conversations. And also a skills dictionary, which provides definitions of key skills to drive greater alignment and facilitate when discussing skills and key roles. Now, the question I get asked probably more than any other is, how long does this exercise take? It sounds like it's going to take forever and we don't really have the time to be able to do it. But the reality is it can take as long as you have time to do it. And as Stephen spoke about from a Lloyd's perspective, we had to do it ever so quickly. So we needed something that we could turn around quite fast. So you can do it at a very high level in a matter of weeks. When we did it the first time at Lloyd's, we did it pan group. So this was around 60, 70,000 FTE we had to cover, and those 12 divisions and supporting functions that Stephen spoke about. And we did it in a matter of months. But also you can do it at a much more granular level, and as Stephen highlighted with our engineering function, which is a far smaller number of colleagues, but we've spent 6 months understanding, further refining, discussing and identifying actions off the back of it. So in terms of the time spent, it's totally up to you. And we'll touch on this throughout the exercise, that this is a completely configurable toolkit to be used how you want to use it in a way that's right for your organization. So before we go into the demo, let's now talk about the approach itself. Jumping onto the next slide, of all of the materials in the toolkit, the most important part is probably this diagram. And I say that because it pretty much gives you everything in a single slide that you need to understand in order to understand the approach that's been adopted. And really at the heart of it are the 3 workshops in the middle. And this is the series of conversations that you need to have with business leaders about the direction of the business. Now, whilst many say that workforce planning is all about data and technology, and there's no doubt that both elements have a very significant role to play, the most important element is understanding the direction that the business leaders want to take their business, coupled with how quickly they want to get there. And this is why these are at the heart of the approach. It's about great conversations to establish clear direction. So you have the 3 key phases in the middle, and then at either end, they're bookended by gathering the right inputs to start off the exercise and the right outputs to drive action off the back of it. Otherwise, it's just a series of very nice and I'm sure very pleasant conversations. But if they don't drive action, they're not going to result in any meaningful or material change. So that's the high level approach, but we're now going to go into where you can actually find it, because what we want to show to you is that we had integrated it within the design of the FSSC website. So it's really easy to access all of the different bits and the materials off the back of it. So what you will find is if you go to the homepage of Financial Services Skills Commission and then click on the top right-hand side, it will take you to a section which is covering future skills tools. And within that, you'll find the previous product that we launched, which is the Future Skills Framework. But underneath that now, you'll find that there's a box that links to the Skills Toolkit. So if we click onto that, and you'll be able to see the toolkit itself. So it was important for us to be able to start with the overview of the approach, because you can now see clearly how that's been built into the website. So across the top, you've got tabs, which are gathering input and support, which is where you start. Where are we now, workshop 1? Where do we need to be, workshop 2? How do we close the gap, workshop 3? And then implementing the skills action plan. And each of those are clickable, so you can go into them and really understand what you need to do, but also how you go about doing it. If we go into, and what I propose doing is touching on each of the workshops, which are the key bits. I'm going to bring to life some of those workshops so that you can see in practice how the toolkit gets used. So if we start off with where are we now and workshop 1, what you'll see here on this scrolling page is first a series of objectives, and there are 4 key objectives that are highlighted for this first phase. First, you need to understand the current work undertaken by each of the business areas. You then need to identify the 10 to 15 key roles that comprise around 70 to 80% of that workforce in each of those business areas. You can then talk about and identify the key skills that colleagues currently need, and then you can identify the proficiency levels. So you'll see those objectives are brought to life for you at the top of the page. And this workshop is so important because it creates the baseline for everything that happens afterwards. And from my experience, if you can spend the time getting this right, it makes the whole exercise far easier, because you'd be amazed how many people and organizations, Lloyd's included when we started off, didn't understand a great deal about our current workforce in terms of the critical roles and the critical skills that we needed. We had various different systems that had different role titles described differently, different skills articulated differently, even though they were basically the same. So spending the time to make sure you've got a really firm baseline is really important. Now, just using this as an example, if we scroll further down the page, what you'll find in every section is a video. And I'm afraid it's a video with me. So you get to hear me talking through how to do each of these individual workshops. I assure you they are no more than 5-6 minutes, so they're relatively quick and easy, but they give you practical guidance as to how to go about, in this instance, workshop 1. And that what you'll find right at the bottom of all of the pages then are materials that you can download. So in the instance of workshop 1, you have the slides that support you through the workshop, as well as other supporting tools and resources that you can use to help you complete the exercise. Jumping back up to the top of the page then, if we go into workshop 2, and this is critical, and you will find I use that quite a lot for each of these workshops, but it's critical for a different reason. So you'll often find that you can do workshop 1 with a load of HR folk, certain representatives from the business, but workshop 2, it's key. You have the right people there and the right business leaders at the right level who really understand the future strategy of the business area or the division that you are completing the exercise for. And there are 5 key objectives that you'll see for workshop 2. You need to make sure that everybody understands, certainly the newbies who are joining for the first time, why you're completing the exercise in the first place and why it's important. Because as much as anything else, this is a change management exercise. People might be spending the first time doing this that they've done before. So making sure they understand why we're asking their time and what the outputs will be and what the difference will be made off the back of it is critically important. You then go on to confirming the understanding you've taken from the first workshop about the key roles, the work they do and the key skills required. And then it's into the meat and veg of the session, which is understanding what new activity, if any, these roles might be expected to perform in the future. And when we talk about the future, and so this is one of the stats that both Mark and Stephen spoke to, this isn't about over the next 12 months or even within the next 2 years. You need that short-term perspective and medium-term, but you also need long-term. You need a bit of crystal ball gazing to take you out to 4 to 5 years. And the big reason for that is, whereas we can do a lot of stuff with technology quite quickly, people stuff doesn't happen in that window of time. It takes years. If you want to identify the need, for example, for a graduate program, in order to start recruiting a new skill, it takes time to agree the campaign, go out and advertise to graduates, bring them on board, and then start them and then run them through a 2-year program. And before you know it, 3 years has gone. So if you're only predicting what you need for the next year to 2 years, you'd have missed the window with graduates. You need to go far further out. And the same applies for apprenticeships, for large-scale recruitment campaigns, for big learning programs where you need to pick people out of the business for 6 months, maybe even a year, in order to build the skills you need. So you need to make sure you're thinking long-term, which is challenging, but it's why you get the right people and take the time to be able to do it. What you also need to understand is that people are committed to, as part of workshop 2, any expected changes in headcount have already set up to cost reductions or growth in particular areas. So making sure what that backdrop is critically important. And then at the end of, after understanding all of that, you need to have the time understanding the changes and what that will mean in terms of the key skills for the future. Jumping on then, and pretty much the last workshop is workshop 3. So if we go to the next tab, how do you close the gap between the two? And this is all about understanding the size of that gap and then building a plan to close it. And there are 4 key objectives with this workshop. You need to confirm your understanding from the last workshop about the future of the business, where it's going and the roles that are most key to that and the key skills. And you then need to discuss and agree the actions required to close those gaps. And this is where you bring in your HR specialists from learning, recruitment, talent. I've talked about graduates and apprenticeships, from redeployment, but they will help you to identify what you might have heard described as build, buy, borrow, retain, and redeploy actions that are required to close the gap. And off the back of that, you can then, in a final tab, finish the exercise by having concrete actions, those that are tangible and measurable and with clear owners, so you can hold people accountable to deliver them. And this is key, and certainly the video highlights the importance of this, because if you don't do this part well, then nothing that has come before would really have been worth it. So they are all of the parts of the toolkit, and a few details around the objectives and how the way it's been laid out and the supporting materials are there to help you. But is this toolkit for you? Well, it's been designed as an all-you-can-eat buffet. You can use as much or as little of it as you would like. The high-level approach might be enough for some. So that slide I showed you to begin with, which you can download with the materials under gathering input and support. But for others, you might choose to consume all of it and use all of the output spreadsheets that are included and the slides themselves to write up everything you do. But most importantly, this is about creating the time and the space to identify the skills you'll need for the future and to agree the actions you'll take to development. The toolkit is purely there to help. But you should not feel like you have to use all of it. Ultimately, if you can achieve the same ends through different means, then please go on and do that. And the degree to which you can tailor it to make it right for your business, I'm sure will determine the success that you have with implementing it. And speaking of implementing it, I'm now going to hand over to Simi from Siemens, who's going to give us a sense as to how they've gone about doing a very similar exercise and using a toolkit at Siemens. Simi, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning to you all. So yes, I'm Simi Korsandu and I'm part of Siemens Financial Services. My role is a business exec learning and development, and I'm lucky enough in my role to analyse, go through feedback and understand what our employees want in our business, which led on to our skill gap analysis project. So within Siemens Financial Services, this has been a topic which has been on and off for some time. And I guess it's one of those challenges of how do we approach this? How do we actually understand the employees and understand their skills and how we need to upskill them and reskill them? Where do we start? So from one of the in-house programs that we done, we led on to create this project. We were able to encourage a self-led learning culture to review individuals and their roles, and this was done through development talks. And then it led on to the financial, sorry, I always get this, sorry. Got my notes. Financial Service Skills Commission Skill Gap Analysis Toolkit. So we reviewed it. We found it a bit challenging for Siemens. And we reached out to Lloyds to understand how they used it, how they incorporated it within their business, and any challenges that they overcame. We were able to then sit down, so myself and Kerry Huntley at the time, who was our business partner, HR business partner, we were able to sit down and understand how we are going to project this for our business going forward. And then the way we done that was to share it with our leadership and the wider management team. We shared that this is right for now, this is right for our business. We want to not only lead a self-led learning culture, but we want to upskill our employees and retain our current talent that we have. And we will do that by investing in our employees. So once we had shared this with the wider management team and the leadership team to gain their support and further encouragement, we were able to gain a champion from each department. So in Siemens Financial Services, we have various departments such as marketing, finance, operations, so on. We requested for a senior level management employee, purely because they will be able to understand the roles and the skill sets for those individuals at the current time. So we proposed this project to our business probably just over a year ago. There were a few changes, so it wasn't as smooth sailing as can be expected with any project. So there were some structural changes. So we've had, now I can say we've had all departments come in and complete that initial workshop 1. So all departments have completed the roles and their current skill sets. When sharing with the champions, yes, we had the same challenges of how long will this take me? So I was able to provide further support and have one-to-one workshops with those champions to ensure that they don't feel too overwhelmed and it's not too complicated. But I would say that it also depends on the number of employees within that function. So marketing have 5 employees, operations have a headcount of 36, maybe a little bit more now. So it does vary, and I think it's just the time and the support. I was able to kind of check in with them on a regular basis to ensure that they don't feel too overwhelmed and they do a section by section or what works for them. I think that was our biggest challenge overall, considering other business priorities taken in place, business like the structures coming into place. We have year end. So once that's all taken into account, it has finally just taken us under a year for all departments to complete that toolkit from a workshop 1 perspective. And now we are currently looking at the business wider goals, future goals, and from a department level as well. And then that brings back into the development talks. And then that's where we will incorporate workshop 2 and 3 going forward.